And welcome to Westfield Promise. This is a really exciting moment for both Kevin and myself. This is one of my favorite classes to teach, and I can't speak for Kevin, but since 2017, when we started this program, this has been some of the best teaching I've ever done in my life. And I'm so proud to be here, and I really want to appreciate you all for being here as well. My name is Bob Williams. I am a teacher here at Holyoke High School starting this year. I'm also a professor at Westfield State University. Um, Actually, right now at this moment while you're watching this, I am downstairs in room 220 talking to a group of ninth graders and teaching them U.S. History 1. So I'm in two places at the same time right now, which is kind of weird. Um, I wanted to introduce myself today. I'm not going to take too long in this video, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what the course is going to look like, what the expectations are, what we're going to be talking about, a general introduction into the program, and I wanted to welcome you personally to this really exciting adventure we're going to go on. So first and foremost, Mr. Bouchard and myself, we have somewhat different roles in the classroom. Um, the constraints of time and the realities of scheduling meant that I'm not going to be able to join you in person very often. Most of the time you're going to be interacting with me is going to be in this format. Um, I'm going to be delivering lectures on the readings that you're doing. I'm going to be talking to you about important concepts that are being brought up in the texts. I'm going to be introducing you to some brand new ideas, and we're going to start doing that at the end of this video today. That's my role. I curate the readings, I deliver the lectures, the primary instruction, and Mr. Bouchard's role is to support you guys in understanding those readings. This is a kind of a combined college and high school class. I'm doing the college end of it, Mr. Bouchard's doing the high school end of it. So he's providing all of the support that you would get from a high school teacher, all of the support you would get from a normal high school classroom. So a coach, an instructor who's by your side all the time, helping you through any problems or questions you might have moment to moment as we go through this process. And I'm the college side of it, delivering the kind of more um, broader based instruction that you would normally get at a college or university. So those are our roles. But we work together very closely. We designed this course together. We collaborate constantly. During the school year, we talk to each other, if not daily, then every other day. It's been a real pleasure and an honor. Um, the course is structured around three primary forms of assessment. The first and foremost is the writing component. Each unit, which is about 8 weeks, so it matches up to your quarter system, you're going to be writing a paper. And you're not just going to start writing that paper a couple of weeks before the paper is due. You're going to start writing that paper next week. And by that I mean you're going to be collecting the evidence from the readings that you're going to be later using in your paper. If you look at your syllabus, and actually this might be a good time to pause the video so everybody can look up their syllabi on the Google Classroom. So why don't we go ahead and push pause and everybody can look that up. Okay, if you're looking at your syllabus right now, you're going to see at the very top, not at the very top, but if you scroll down to where all of the classes are laid out, all the weeks are laid out, you're going to see an essential question. That's the question that you're going to be answering at the end of week 8. And so as you're reading the very first reading, Melance, you're going to be taking notes, looking for any evidence that might help answer that question, right? You're going to be looking for any evidence within that first reading that might apply to that question that you're seeing at the top of Unit 1. Mr. Bashard is going to help you do this. You have never read this kind of scholarship before, and we do not expect you to be experts at it. We are going to be supporting you every step of the way. I have office hours on Tuesdays after school. So if anybody wants to do any extra help, please come up and see me. Mr. Bashard also has office hours on Tuesday after school. You can go and talk to him, right? We encourage you guys to come and talk to us if you ever have any questions, if you ever want to dig into any of this stuff, all right? If you're confused, ask for help. We will be there for you, I promise. The second component of this, tied into the writing, is the reading and the note-taking, right? This is very important. This is the day-to-day work that you guys are going to be putting in, reading this material, growing accustomed to it, taking notes on it, capturing what you think is important, and looking to build that evidence base for that essential question. The third component of this is participating in class discussion. One of the things that is so amazing about the human mind is that when we talk about things, how we think about them changes. Like every time you remember something or tell a story about something that happened, your memory of that event changes slightly. It's really weird. Every time you read something and talk about something with your friends, your understanding of that thing changes a little bit. It's fascinating. So when we're doing class discussion, this is not just a performance. This should not be a performance at all. This is a chance for you to actually dig into the questions that you have on the readings. And it's also an expectation of the class. When you get into college, you are going to be required to participate in class discussions. It is an essential component of higher education, and it's an essential component of this class. So now that we have kind of a basic overview of the expectations, we're going to be looking at the syllabus. If we look at the first unit that you guys have in front of you, we're going to be examining the world before capitalism. We're going to be looking at Europe. We're going to be looking at West Africa. We're going to be looking at North America and the kind of communitarian Native American groups. We're going to be looking at Meso and South America and the great empires of the Aztec and the Inca. We're going to be looking at South Asia and the Mughal Empire that is emerging in South Asia in the 15th century. We're going to be looking at the Ming Dynasty and examining this incredibly advanced civilization. We're going to be looking at the Japanese, right, who are going through in the 15th century a horrifyingly bloody period known as the Sengoku Jidai, or the Warring States period. When we get to the second unit, we're going to be looking at the emergence of capitalism out of Europe, right? We're going to get a little flavor of it in the first unit as we see the embryonic components of it beginning to put themselves together in northern Italy in the 15th century. Now we're going to move on to the 16th century and see it explode out into the world, see it wrap its tentacles around these societies that we've just read a lot about, and watch them squeeze many of these cultures to death. The Ming Dynasty falls, the Mughal eventually collapse, the Japanese are forced to sequester themselves into this like secret little garden that they wall around. The Inca and the Aztec are wiped out. The Native American communities of the Northeast are shattered and destroyed beyond all recognition. Even the cultures that had existed in Europe are rended asunder and changed. So we're going to look at that process during Unit 2. In Unit 3, we're going to see the maturization of this victorious world system of capitalism as it begins to both extend itself out into those few areas it hasn't acquired for its uses, and also begins to penetrate deeper into the societies that it has already captured. The tentacles begin to tighten, if you will. In Unit 4, we're going to see capitalism through this extraction of surplus value globally mature into a industrial machine. And not only the hard technology or the industrial technology of production, we're going to see that get more advanced. We're also going to witness the advancement of technologies of organization, the birth of the modern state, the birth of modern militaries, the birth of modern legal systems, all in service of this global system of production and appropriation. Appropriation is just a fancy word for theft. So the consequences of that, we're going to finally end with when we talk about the First and Second World War. So we're going to begin with the invention of this early merchant capitalism, the invention of like double entry bookkeeping and compound interest calculations, and we're going to end with the annihilation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945. The world that we're going to begin looking at is going to be very unfamiliar to you. Over time, as we read, as we go from unit to unit, the world that is being described and analyzed is going to look increasingly familiar. That's because what we're going to be looking at is the creation of the world in which we live. And the hope of this course, the hope of the creators of this course, is that it will help you understand the world in which you live better. It will help you understand the forces that are at work that dictate the terms of your life, and hopefully will begin to give you a sense of how to push back effectively and meaningfully against those forces. So right now I want to introduce you with this introductory conversation to some vocab words. I want to talk about the perspective in which this course is being taught. In order to do that, I have to talk about some vocabulary that might not be familiar to you. So first and foremost, this course is taught through a Marxist lens. Now, Marxism is a word that's often used to define the political ideology of socialism or communism. It's also a historical methodology. Marx, after all, was a historian and an economist. He was a political activist and believed in a particular solution to capitalism, but he was also somebody who simply wrote about the history of human beings and the economic forces at work that drove that history. And so Marxist historians are historians that look at the structure of society, the modes of production that drive historical forces forward, and that it is so much more important to look at how surplus value is created. It's so much more important to look at how production is done and the social relationships that emerge out of that productive model than it is to look at religion or culture as an explanatory factor driving history. In other words, when we look at rich people and powerful people making decisions, we look at where the money is, right? We look at where is their economic interest in this? Where is the class imperative? That's vocab word. Class imperative. Because rich people, they want to stay rich. They don't ever want to be poor. Chris Rock used to tell a joke that if Bill Gates woke up tomorrow with Oprah Winfrey's money, he would blow his own brains out. Rich people don't even want to be slightly less rich, right? Once you've acquired power, giving up that power is nearly unthinkable. It's almost existentially threatening. In fact, I would argue that it is existentially threatening. When we're talking about the structure of society, what we're talking about, in other words, is the mode of production. That is how things are made and how the value that's created is appropriated by the elite class. So in the ancient world, you had masters and slaves, right? You look at ancient Babylon or ancient Assyria or ancient Egypt, you had masters and you had slaves, right? And the masters owned the slaves and they owned the land, and the slaves worked the land, and the slaves were given a small, amount of the surplus of the value they produced to live off of, to eat, and the rest of it was taken by the master. The master owned the totality of everything, right? And they had that was the structure of society, right? That's the mode of production largely in the ancient world. Rome is a slaveocracy. Athens was a slaveocracy. Sparta, if you've ever seen the movie 300, that was a slaveocracy, right? The great powers of the ancient world were slaveocracies. They were the stories that we hear about these great, men often, almost all of them were slaveholders. Almost all of them had their position because they owned the land and they owned the labor that worked that land. As we transition into the medieval world, after the fall of the Roman Empire, the slaveocracies that were sustained by the Roman state are no longer tenable, right? People rise up. There's no, 10,000 Roman legionaries just down the street who are going to crucify me, literally, if I rebel against my master. So we're going to rebel against our master. Why should we be owned by this other human being? And so there's a shift in the mode of production. Rather than slaves, you have lords and serfs. So instead of masters and slaves, you have lords and serfs. And a serf is not a slave. A serf or a peasant, another word for serf, is someone who lives on the land and works the land and has no ownership of that land, but has a customary and understood right to certain privileges on that land. They're allowed to graze their pigs in the woods. They're allowed to graze their cattle and sheep in the meadows and the wastes. They're allowed to collect a certain amount of firewood from the forest. They're allowed to go hunting sometimes. They're allowed to trap for rabbits sometimes. They're allowed to grow vegetables on certain amounts of land. They're allowed to grow wheat on other strips of land. They have very specific duties and they have very specific privileges that are afforded to them. So they're not slaves. In exchange for this, they agree to give a certain surplus of a certain amount of their surplus to their lord in exchange for this protection of these privileges. Feudalism starts to fall apart in the 14th century, largely because of the Black Death. We're going to talk more about that. And it transitions into a new mode of production that originates in northern Italy in the 15th century, we call capitalism. Now, capitalists are not lords, and they're not ancient masters. They are not looking to scoop off a little surplus value off of their slaves in the wheat field or their serfs in the farmlands of Western Europe. They're interested in profit, the maximization of profit. They are a new class of people who emerge interested in maximizing their gains. They're not happy with what they've got. They want more. We're going to talk about why that is next week. But that transition from the lord to the bourgeoisie, which doesn't occur immediately, but it starts in the 15th century, and very slowly over the course of the next 100 years, capitalists become more and more and more powerful until by the 17th century, it is the dominant mode of production in Europe. and it has become the dominant mode of production on the planet. Capitalism emerges triumphant over feudalism because it is a superior method of appropriating and consolidating surplus value. Let's talk about what value means. Value is anything you make that has use. So, for example, I grow a field of wheat, I chop that wheat down, I thresh it, meaning I beat it until it comes out of the husk. I take the berries that I've threshed and I bring them to a mill and I grind them into flour and I bake that flour into bread. That bread has value. I can eat that bread and it will sustain my life. I have transformed some grass seeds, which is what wheat is, it's just grass. I've transformed some grass seeds into food that will sustain me, right? That is the creation of value. The transformation of something that has no use for a human into something that has use. Surplus value is anything that I create that I don't need to survive. Anything above and beyond what I create, but I don't need to survive. And if I live in a, communitarian society like Native Americans prior to the arrival of Europeans in the Northwest and the Northeast rather, my village keeps that surplus value. We all appreciate that surplus value. That surplus value makes our lives better and more enjoyable, right? We get a little bit more food to eat than we absolutely need, or we are able to make clothes for ourselves that make us comfortable, and we make bedding for ourselves, and we make jewelry, and we make all kinds of different things that make our lives better and more enjoyable. The creation of hierarchical modes of production, master and slave, lord and serf, capitalist and worker, or as the French and the Germans say, bourgeoisie and proletariat, fancy words for capitalist and worker. In those modes of production, you have a social relationship of exploitation, meaning one class makes stuff and another class steals the surplus value, takes it from them by force, either personal force in the case of a master and a slave, or force in the form of law in capitalism, right? And so one of the things we're going to be looking at is the transformation of the uses of force, the institutionalization of force, force being taken out of the hand of the Lord in the form of the sword and being put into the hands of an institution that performs that function for the lords, for the powerful, for the bourgeoisie. We're going to talk about class, not class in terms of how much money people think they make in relation to other people, but class in terms of your relationship to the mode of production. Do you produce value? Is that value taken from you at a higher rate than you produce it? So, for example, if we can even talk about something that's super rich. Let's talk about Tom Brady. Tom Brady is a worker. Tom Brady produces value. Over the course of his 20-year career, Tom Brady probably made the New England Patriots about $50 billion. That's billion with a B. $50 billion. $50 billion. He made, on average, the bonuses, mix them together, it's about $23 million a year. So over his 23-year career, or his 23-year career, he made about $500 million, roughly. $500 million versus $50 billion. He made 1/100th of what he produced. 1/100th. This is what he was paid. This is what he made, right? The difference is shocking. What that difference is called is surplus value. The difference between what he was paid and what he earned. That's surplus value. The social relationship that allows an elite to take that surplus value under the guise of custom or law, that is what we call a mode of production. That is the structure of society. That is what defines society more than any other force. And that is what drives history. People acting out of their class imperative to maintain their position within the capitalist order. That is the driving force of history. And the resistance from below to their exploitation by the proletariat, the worker. Above the structure of society, we have what's called the superstructure. This is all of the things that society generates, that the elite within society generate, to excuse the social relationship of exploitation. This is the culture. This is the music. This is the movies, the films, the sermons on the pulpit, the paintings, the architecture, the poetry, all of it is the superstructure. And what the superstructure is everyone wrestling with the same problem, which is how do we explain and justify this system of immiseration and exploitation? We're going to be talking a lot more about all of this stuff next week. So I don't want you to get too worried that I'm throwing so much at you right now. Just wanted to give you a little taste of what we're going to be doing, and I really look forward to teaching you this year. And I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you so much. Welcome to Westfield Promise.